Hello, and welcome to Hopeful Conversations, brought to you by Robbie's Hope Foundation. I am your host, Kari Eckert. Joining me today is Sara Hoover, a community engagement specialist who executes her passion for youth wellness and mental health through utilizing conscious discipline and trauma-informed care. Sara works for the Child Care Resource Network, focusing on the important aspects of child development and access to quality care and education. Sara, thank you for joining us and welcome to Hopeful Conversations.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Where should we start? Do you want to tell us about conscious discipline and what it aims to accomplish?
Sure. The wonderful thing about conscious discipline is it really is for everybody, for all ages. I first started looking into it when hearing from early education teachers and caregivers sharing frustrations with challenging behaviors in the classroom, and looking at the data in our state and nationwide of children, very young children, toddlers even, that are being expelled from early care and education programs because of behavior. And I actually started out professionally as a social worker before I moved into early childhood, and did a lot of work with foster care and adoption and permanency planning, and when parental needs were terminated, and a lot of work with child abuse and neglect, and the importance of the early years to development, and especially the social emotional development really struck me. And then seeing these patterns being perpetrated in early care and education settings where rather than having their social and emotional needs met, they're being expelled for challenging behaviors. And then the flip side of that, having teachers and caregivers that are overwhelmed with behaviors in the classroom that they aren't equipped to be able to meet the needs of the children. And conscious discipline, I started looking into it, and what really struck me right off the bat that set it apart from some other programs or curriculums is the fact that it's social emotional learning for all ages, and it's adult first. It's all about us learning how to regulate our own emotions and find our own composure and our own calm state so that we can then teach that to a child. Because if we're frustrated, if we're stressed, if we're upset, we're not going to be able to actually teach and help a child who is also frustrated and upset. The other thing I really like about conscious discipline is that it's a practice. It's not something you go through the training and then all of a sudden you're conscious of your own internal states and how you're going to react, and you're not in control of your responses. But it's something that you can practice and continually get better at. And due to brain plasticity, we can train our bodies to do some of the deep breathing and be more self-aware, and then respond in ways to calm ourselves so that then we can teach children. Mm-hmm. So that's what started the conscious discipline journey for me. And then I've been able to do a lot of workshops for families, not so much for childcare providers within my current scope of work, but in my volunteer time, I have done some trainings for childcare providers, and just having that conversation about ways that we can practice our own composure and strategies that we can use for ourselves that then we can teach and pass that on to children and youth. And I have 2 grown children and a teenager currently. And I can say I didn't know conscious discipline when they were little, but I do try to work on it now, and it does work with teenagers. So that's
wonderful.
Helpful.
I would imagine it works adult to adult relationship as well. Being conscious
it absolutely does. Yes.
Where you are when you're responding to the situation that wants you to respond. calming yourself
Absolutely.
first, which is so hard. So hard. I'm at the parent age of love and logic. So that's a little bit, we always want to learn as parents and try to do our best. It's not particularly easy. Um, let's talk about the I love you ritual.
Yeah. So, conscious discipline has several strategies and ways to build connection and safety and problem solving. Connection is the underlying need behind all children, and actually, as humans, we all desire that connection and that love and that sense of belonging. Um, and I love you rituals are one way for families and early care and education settings. Um, they would look a little different for youth, but it's a way to work on a regular basis to connect with your children. And if it's okay, before going into that, I wanted to explain a little bit about the brain state model that conscious discipline
Please.
really
Yes.
follows. Okay. And that
Absolutely.
will help, again, show the importance of that connection piece.
Uh-huh.
So the brain state model of conscious discipline, I'm going to use my hand, but I'll verbally explain it for those that are listening only. But if we use our hand, our palm and our wrist is the lower palm and the wrist would be the brain stem. And this is the survival state. And in the survival state, what that child or what we need is a sense of safety. We need to feel safe. Going up a little bit, the limbic system is the full palm, and that's the emotional state. And the need in this state is that connection. We need to feel connected. We need to feel loved and accepted. And then folding over that, if you make a fist with your thumb inside and your fingers wrap down, that's the prefrontal cortex or the prefrontal lobe. And that's the executive state. So when we are operating out of our executive state, that's where we can learn, that's where we can teach, and that's where we can problem solve. We use this example sometimes, especially with children, when you flip your lid and your hand flies open, your brainstem is exposed. So you're in that survival mode, and that's a fight or flight. And it doesn't have to be as dramatic as it sounds. For example, my husband and I, something that we've determined when we are stressed or having an argument or whatever, the fight or flight can look very different. So he tends to be the fight, and he wants to hash it out. He wants to talk it out, hash it out, wants to say what he needs to say. And he just keeps coming like, no, we're going to deal with this. And when I'm really stressed out, I would be the flight, which for me is more about withdrawing. I want to kind of withdraw with my feelings. I get stuck in the emotional state in that limbic system for a long time where I'm just feeling my feelings and I'm processing them. But my tendency is to withdraw until I can calm down. And then we usually end up doing that. And then we come back when we've moved out of those states and we've got the lid back on. Our prefrontal cortex is wrapped over our palm and our hands are in a fist again. And then we can come back and talk about it. For young children, a lot of times this is where the violent behavior comes in, like the throwing things, or kicking or shouting, when they're in the fight stage, or if they're more of a flight kid, it might be crawling under a table. So insisting that they're not allowed to be under the table and insisting that they come out, chances are it's just going to keep escalating things. So looking at, okay, this child is not feeling safe. What can I do? And then the number one thing, breathing, and connection. And they need to feel safe and they need to feel connected before you can talk about maybe why they're under the table. So it's just a nice way to think about, if you have a child of any age or yourself, what brain state are they in? Are they able to listen to reason? Are they able to problem solve? Are they able to handle a lecture? Or are they down here in the brainstem where they just need to feel safe and they need to feel connected to you? And so that's where I love you. Yes. And because we can't learn things when we're in these lower the lower parts of our brain are not places where we can learn things. So I love you rituals are a great way to enhance that connection and that bonding and that secure relationship and attachment, so that when their lid is flipped and they're operating out of the lower states, the lower parts of their brain, they have that connection with you and you're able to connect with them on an easier level than, say, if you already have a little bit of an insecure relationship and they don't necessarily feel connected or loved by you. So it's important to make sure that we are showing that love and connection, and that their relationship with us is safe in times, all the time, so that when things are really hard, they still have that feeling and it's easier to help them feel safe and connected. So that's kind of the why behind the I love you rituals. I know that's a little bit of a tangent.
No, it's super helpful. Super, super helpful. So I hear that there's 4 elements of connection of an I love you ritual. 1 being eye contact, gentle touch, number 2, presence, number 3, and playfulness, number 4. You want to walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah. So those 4 elements of connection, a lot of it has to do back to that brain. Not that we want to be neuroscientists, but the eye contact, really, there is something that happens when you make eye contact with another person face to face. Your internal states are felt by that person, and their brain responds in a way where they can actually feel. That's where empathy comes from. They can actually feel what you're feeling. And so making eye contact with them is really, really important. And that goes right along with presence too, which is really hard for us. And it's especially hard, I think, for parents when we have so many things we're trying to do. We have so many agendas, things we want our children to do and things we want our children to not do, things that we just have to get done. But really clearing your mind and just being present with your child or your youth, and having them on your mind and your love and your care for them, and just being present with that eye contact. And the touch is the same way. Touch is the only sense that we can't live without.
I read that. It's so interesting.
Yeah. And it does release, I forget the name of it, but it releases a hormone that is, again, helpful for learning and neural pathways in the brain. So it's more than just the feeling that it gives us. It also benefits us physically.
And some people struggle with touch.
Well, and that's a really good point. And it really depends on the child. And that's where that presence and that attunement really comes in, because you can't be attuned with your child or a child, say, in your classroom, unless you're fully present with them and that you're respecting them as a whole person, and honoring them as a whole person, and considering them a capable being. But I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. About touch being difficult for some children. So with my 2 children, my oldest was always, he's still super cuddly, a hugger. And then my daughter came along and she did not even want to rock in a rocking chair. She's always on the move. And she's not touchy-feely. She definitely does not appreciate touch from other people other than her family. And so part of that gentle touch and part of that with an I love you ritual is knowing your child and being attuned with them. It might be holding hands. It might be a hug. It might be touching fingertips. But if you're attuned with them, you're doing what feels good to them. And so if it's a pat on the shoulder or just touching fingertips, then that's what you want to honor. And if it's a hug, that's great too, if you're a hugger. I've gotten into the habit with other people. I know my own children's kind of boundaries where they're at with being touchy feely, but with other people, other adults in particular, is asking,
Yes.
Are you a hugger? Can I give you a hug? If it's an appropriate situation for that. And we need to respect that for children too. But there are ways for gentle touch that are definitely respectful and caring and being attuned to their needs.
Awesome. Awesome. I love how you said that every child, every person is capable. Like if we can make that assumption when we approach a person, how that could change things so quickly. You have some animals that love you.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. We can edit that out. That's the beauty of not live recording.
They'll calm down. My husband is getting home from work. I'm shut in a room, but he's getting home from work and there's nothing I can do.
They're super happy. Are you on East Coast time?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a big time difference.
Yeah. So it's 4:24 here.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I apologize if, I don't know.
No.
When I just,
our
they
humanness. You're like, I'm on a recorded call. Quiet it down. Oh, that's awesome. They sound like they're big dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yes.
Touch is so important. I find it just and it's so personalized for different people. And I must be a touchy person. Even the other day, someone sat down next to me at a concert a little too close. And she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I put my hand on her leg by accident. This is adult to adult. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, oh, that's okay. No worries at all. And then I was like, oh my. And we, of course, were able to laugh it off and it was okay, but just a little bit awkward.
Well, and I think that's another thing that's important too, is to acknowledge, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have done that. Acknowledging goes a long way, even with children. We don't all, always have to be right. We just need to be genuine, and ourselves with our children. It's important that they see us being genuine and sincere. And when we, for example, when we're not able to calm down, when we get upset, and we yell or we act harshly and then we regret it, and explaining, I should have handled it better. I didn't handle it as well as I should have. And next time I'm going to do better. Next time I'm going to remember to, take breaths. And next time, I'm going to do better. I always tell my kids, I don't want an apology. I want the behavior change. And I'm like, I need to do that myself. So I try not to just say, I'm sorry I yelled at you, but I didn't calm down. This is what I did that I could have done better. And then next time I'm going to do this differently.
Role modeling that humanness to whatever age, when a child has that ability to respond to it.
I mean, no matter how wise or old or experienced we are, the world is hard sometimes, and it's challenging, and we get frustrated, and that's part of being human. And conscious discipline, it does not say we shouldn't feel that way. All feelings are valid. And it's about acknowledging them and then deciding how to move forward and being conscious of how it's affecting us physically and why our responses are the way they are. It's really just about being conscious, and doing better next time. And modeling that for our children and considering them whole beings that are capable. Dr. Becky Bailey, who created Conscious Discipline, talks a lot about that. And I was going to mention, if this is okay, but she has a book that I really recommend to parents. A lot of conscious discipline is definitely geared towards early childhood, but she has a lot of books that are written for parents, and curriculums for schools go up through high school. So really treating youth with respect and honoring them as capable individuals um, is a key value of conscious discipline.
Dr.
My
Becky
favorite,
Bailey.
yes.
And the name of the book that you're recommending is?
It's called Easy to Love, Difficult to Discipline. And it's the 7 basic skills for turning conflict into cooperation. And it's a very easy read. It's paperback. You can get it on Amazon for, not a lot of money. And then I also have the I Love You Rituals book, which I love. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for parents of older children. But if you have younger children or grandchildren, it would be a great book. It's pretty old. I found it on eBay for a couple bucks. I didn't necessarily want to spend a lot of money. And then the website itself, Conscious Discipline, has a lot of free resources and printables that you can access. And that's one thing when I'm talking to parents or childcare providers or teachers, pointing out to them, there are like amazing trainings and professional opportunities, but you can also access a lot of the resources for free, and you will learn a lot about yourself and about the other people in your life and how you can interact with them. So there are a lot of resources that can be accessed by anybody.
Thank you for sharing those. I find like parenting adolescents is like just a different time. And sometimes I remember when my children were young teenagers, I like went to those resources because problems start, teenage years, they start to show, and it's like you're trying to parent a different child. So like I needed tools in my toolbox to try to parent differently than like a toddler, always changing. It's just so interesting. I like the conscious part and the role modeling. I wish I would have had the opportunity to go back and say like, I'm sorry I did this, and next time I hope to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Yeah, it has a very wide application, just for us as humans, which I really appreciate.
Kind of leads into go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I wanted to share a situation I had with my teenage daughter last year, where I had pulled from conscious discipline and modified it, and it ended up working. It doesn't always, but that's another thing about, when you're parenting, you're always learning. And in fact, Dr. Becky Bailey, who I just mentioned, that created conscious discipline, she talks about how teaching is learning. Learning is teaching. They very much go hand in hand, and you have to try things. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And then you just keep trying. And every child is so different. I mean, anybody who has more than one child knows what works for one child, and then the other one comes along and you're like starting from scratch all over again, trying to figure out strategies.
You had an example with your young teenager?
Yeah. So she had a panic attack in the car on the way to school because her water bottle spilled on her pants, and she wanted to go home and was full-blown panic attack. And my first thought was a lecture, like, it's just water, you're fine, and then my second thought was, I've got all this work to do. I need to just get her to school. And kind of, I was getting really frustrated. And then I paused and really thought about it and think about respecting her as a whole, individual and as a whole person. And knowing that the issue that was causing the panic attack was much deeper than the water that spilled. It was about other things that were going on. The water was just the final straw. And that she was, operating out of the lower areas of her brain, and a lecture was just going to escalate things and make me more upset, make her, continue in her panic attack.
What did you do?
Well, I decided to try to get her to do some breathing exercises with me, which initially went terrible. She's like, I don't know, breathing's not going to help. I don't want to breathe. Breathing's stupid. Full blown teenager. And so I'm like, well, gosh, what do I do now? So then I decided, Dr. Becky Bailey talks about uploading Calm to infants, where you breathe deep with them on your chest. And they have their self-regulation. We'll model your regulation and work together. And I'm like, well, she's not feeling touchy-feely, but I can still sit here and breathe a little bit exaggerated to where she could hear me and see me. And I just started breathing really deeply and slowly. And she did, after about a minute, she started breathing along with me, and everything dissipated and calmed down. I'm not going to say that she was happy when I dropped her off at school, but she came out of her panic attack, and it could have been worse if I had let it escalate, and could have ended up bringing her back home. So it works for all ages.
Breathing for them. That's interesting. I like that. Breath work is such an interesting tool, and kind of, I'm 51, not something that I was taught when I was a teenager or when I was in college. It's relatively new to me, but it really helps a lot of situations.
Mm-hmm. And we tend to, when we're stressed or upset, if you start paying attention, you realize you're not breathing, or you're breathing really shallow and really fast. And that's something I'm really trying to pay attention to. And it's very true. I hold my breath, or I breathe really shallow when I'm stressed, and it really does. At least 3 deep breaths changes the chemistry of what your brain is doing.
3 deep breaths. I don't know if there's a name for this method, but like, this is what I try to teach young people when I have the opportunity, is to take your hand and you take each finger, go up, 1 deep breath, exhale as large, inhale the next finger, exhale. By the time you get to that pinky finger, often you don't remember what was going so quickly in your mind. And it's such a good tool that you can use, and other people don't have to even know that you're doing it, but a good way to teach yourself to do those deeper breaths.
It's a great thing to do in the car if you're driving and you get frustrated. You're stuck in traffic, or at the grocery store, stuck in a line, and someone's being really slow. It's a great time to kind of pay attention to your breathing, and it really does change how you feel. Something that you can do with younger children is have them lay on their back and put a toy on their belly, and practice the deep breathing where they can see their belly go up and down. So that's really important to have. It's the belly breathing, and not like the tight shoulders like that. You want to make sure that you're getting the deep from the diaphragm. And so that's kind of fun. Little kids can enjoy that and see if they can make their toy go up and down when they're like a little rubber ducky or something, when they're breathing in and out.
Teenagers and adults could try that exercise as well to learn how to deep breathe.
And that's back to the playfulness. We kind of skipped over that, but that other piece of I love you rituals, that playfulness piece, teenagers, they need that. Life is stressful, and there's so many pressures. And then if you have, mental health concerns, opportunities to be playful with them is, even if they might act like,
I hate this, right? Yeah.
But at the same time, it really does change their demeanor, and it does enhance your attachment and your relationship and that sense of connection. And that's where that playfulness piece comes in.
Connection. That's a word that you mentioned, and I know it's kind of lacking in society right now. I don't know if it's different from when I was a teenager, but it's something that we need as humans. And with the technology of today, and just the modes of learning and the modes of our world, we don't often have the connection that we used to have. Even though when Mark Zuckerberg created Facebook in his Harvard dorm room, it was to gain connection, but all of that has taken us away. Can you talk about connection for young people?
Yeah. I mean, it's a very different kind of connection, social media. And I think that there are benefits to it as far as youth today being able to talk to their friends and all of that. But one thing that I consider often is when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, when I came home at the end of a hard, stressful day, my bedroom was like a nest, like that safe nest. And certainly that wasn't the case for all. It's not the case for all children where their home is a safe place. But
Right.
for a lot of us, that the coming home, you're away from the drama, and the constant input and pressure from peers and studies and all of that. And you're in your safe place. And I think about my children and how that is gone, because they come home and they go to their room and they have all of that information still flooding them on their phone. And so
We do
it's
it
a
as
very
adults. We do
yes.
it.
Oh, exactly. And so that makes I love you, whether it's I love you rituals or just opportunities where you're using those 4 elements of connection, the eye contact, the presence, that touch, even if it's just a pat on the shoulder, especially with teenagers. I think those moments, and if they can become rituals where you do them every day, it's a little easier to do with young children, where every night before bed. But I mean, I have a little ritual that I do with my daughter before bed. It's a little. It's not the same as a young child, but just make sure you're connecting. Make sure you're connecting on a regular basis, and that they involve that eye contact, that touch. Throw in playfulness whenever you can, and be present with them.
May your child never be too old to say goodnight to. Ah. Okay.
Yes, I love that.
That's what I mean. Describing that's what makes me think. And like my daughter's 25. When I have the opportunity, she doesn't live at home, but when she's in my presence, making sure it's still that same connection, that same ritual, the way we say goodnight to one another.
Yeah.
She's great about it. As a 25-year-old, I must have modeled it okay. And I can think of the goodnight ritual that I had with Robbie as a 15-year-old. Very important. That's kind of leads me into the last question. Well, I have 2 more questions. But the importance of having a secure attachment.
Wow, we are finding out even more and more about the importance of attachment, our attachment relationships, what kinds of attachment relationships that we had when we were very young, especially, I would say, in the more recent decades, with the majority of children being in homes where all adults are working, because it really is hard for the average family to have a parent home not working. We just don't have the infrastructure or the economy for that to take place. And some young children are spending more time in early care and education settings than they are with their parents. And so those attachments are so important, not just with parents, but with other people that are in the lives of young people. All learning takes place within relationships and within connections. Learning starts within connections. And so having strong attachments and strong connections really it's necessary for any growth and development. And the stronger the attachment, the more learning and development can happen. And if we really want to support young people, even through school and beyond, making sure that they have strong, secure attachment, so that they can develop and learn and grow, is when they're young, is essential.
Those attachment needs don't disappear as adults. We all need them as humans.
They don't disappear. Absolutely not. The one good thing is that our brains are always fine-tuning, and new connections are being made, and new connections can be strengthened. And so having even just one adult that shows a child that love and that connection, and encourages that attachment and bonding can change a life.
Absolutely.
Even a child who has not had that previously, because even though 90% of a child's brain is developed by the time they're 5, that doesn't mean that it stops developing or changing. We're always developing and changing, and one adult can change a life by being there for a child or a youth.
Awesome. Thank you for all of that. One last question that we ask everyone, and you can answer this in any way that you would like. What does the world need to hear right now?
That is a really big question. I think that we need to seek compassion for everybody, but especially those that are marginalized or disconnected or hurting. I think that we need to have compassion for families so that they have the resources that they need to be strong, so that they can raise their children in loving relationships. I just think we need more compassion.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Seek more compassion.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sara, so much for joining me today on a hopeful conversation. Be sure to listen to our next episode. And until then, remember, hold on, pain ends.